Anthony Richardson has found a big play threat this offseason, and it couldn't have come at a better time. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you guys get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Again, that is $150 with any winning $5 bet. So hop on, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. What up, y'all? This is Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks of HorseshoeHuddle.com. I am your resident Indianapolis Colts media member, and Zach is your resident film expert. And we are here to tell you a little bit about Colts mandatory veteran minicamp, which after all these years is still hard for me to write and say. So that got started today. It's our last taste of Colts on-field action before 6-7 weeks go by, and we have to wait until the end of July when training camp starts. But it's got plenty of noteworthy things going on, included a season-ending injury already to someone who is, hopefully going to be contributing in a decent role, perhaps even threatening for a starting role. You've got the offense kind of catching fire a little bit. The defense had its number for the past couple weeks. And then some big plays were made elsewhere. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. First, the most unfortunate news of the day. We spoke with head coach Shane Steichen and a handful of players first before practice today. And Steichen mentioned that Daniel Scott tore an Achilles last week during OTA practice. And this is almost like a year to the day that he tore his ACL. Ending his rookie season before it got started. So almost certainly going to affect the vast majority, if not all of his second season as well. Very disappointing because Scott truly was a dark horse candidate to potentially be in that mix for free safety. Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas obviously are the two big names that everybody knows. But that's a couple guys who haven't earned the entire trust yet to be starters. And I even asked, I think it was Shane before, does Daniel Scott factor into this? If you guys got to look for a free safety, and he acknowledged, he is in the mix. So now that is not the case. At worst, I think Scott was going to be an important special teams contributor. And the sky's not falling. I mean, this is a second year mid-round pick who obviously never got on the field as a rookie because of the injury. So again, the sky's not falling, but you're the area where you already have the least depth on your roster, it now takes a hit. A guy who was maybe long shot going to be a starter, but at worst was probably going to see a little time if someone else got hurt. Now you only have one safety in the group who you can rely on, and that's Julian Blackmon. And that's a guy who hasn't really played a full season in the NFL because of his own injuries. So I don't want to make it seem like, oh no, Daniel Scott got hurt, you have to sign someone now. It's more, oh no, a very shallow position just took a depth hit. Now you have to have someone.
Yeah. And before we get into it from a team perspective, I just want to say, man, it is heartbreaking for these guys when, I mean, you especially, I mean, you talk to these guys every offseason, you get to see them up close. And to have a young guy who going into his rookie year has a major injury, comes back, does all the offseason work that he has to do to come back from that ACL last year, gets into camp this year, has a pick in his first week of OTAs on Anthony Richardson. I remember that being a big tweet that came out last week, and then unfortunately has another just major injury. I mean, it just sucks for a player like Daniel Scott, where, look, at the end of the day, he might not have been a star player or a starting player in the NFL, but we never are going to know, really. We probably aren't going to know, because who knows if he ever is going to get on the NFL field at this point. So it's just, heartbreaks for the player. Hopefully he can come back from this one and miraculously get on the fields at some point in his career. But, from the depth perspective, like you mentioned, I'm with you. I think when you're looking at the safety position, you have one guy that you have full trust in, absolute trust in. That's Julian Blackmon, a player who had a fantastic season last year, did some really good things for this team, and is going to be the veteran in the room. But like you said, he hasn't played a full season. The Colts defense could have certainly needed him late in the year last year when he went down with his injury. So you're bringing him back, a guy who's never finished an entire season. And then your other guys are, look, like Nick Cross, I think there's some trust there. I don't think he played poorly by any means last year. And even when Blackmon went down, I don't think Cross was a major liability. But, we all think about that Nico Collins touchdown to start that Week 18 game. That was Nick Cross not getting back in his cover 4 responsibilities. So Nick Cross is certainly there. I don't think I would count him out by any means as like never being a productive player. But, he's got a lot to prove this offseason. And then you got Rodney Thomas, who, he's flashed in his 2 years in the NFL. I think he's got 7-8 picks in his first 2 years in the NFL. So you certainly see the flashes, but when that Week 17 came last year and that Week 18 came last year, when Julian Blackmon was out, who did the Colts go to be the other starting safety? Ronnie Harrison, who's back to being a linebacker this offseason. So that tells you all you really need to know about where the trust is in Rodney Thomas, where it's like, the Colts went to a converted linebacker at starting safety over him in pivotal playoff-like games last year. So I do think that the trust isn't really there for Rodney Thomas. I think it's, somewhat there for Nick Cross. And outside of that, who are we talking about? Michael Tootsie, Trevor Denbo, Kendall Brooks, I think, is on the roster still. Like, these are guys who Marcel Dabo. Oh, dude, that would be the best one right there. If Marcel Dabo can come out of nowhere, that would be fantastic. I mean, they've been working on that one for years at this point. That could be the next Mo Alley Cox. But I think the time is now to go get that veteran. Don't get me wrong. I like Nick Cross getting these reps with these guys, and maybe you wait until the end of mandatory camp so Cross can get these reps. He can get, valuable on-field stuff. You can see what you have in Cross. But if it's not there by the end of this week, you have 6-7 weeks to work out a deal with a Justin Simmons, with a Quandre Diggs, with whatever safety is out there to bring that veteran in the room. And then Cross and Thomas can be really solid depth options and just be fine depth options. Like, if we're looking at these two guys as backup players, that's fine. Like, if Cross is your third safety, he was thriving in that third safety role early in the season when they were going to some 3 safety sets. Like, that's fine. But I think if you go into the season with Cross and Blackmon as your plan and Thomas as your third safety, and then Denbo being an injury away from being on the field, then we're looking at some risky business there. But I do think there's still guys out there. I think it's getting closer to where the Colts need to make a signing here. And again, it's not just, oh no, Daniel Scott's down, it's the end of the season. It's they lost another player who potentially could have played this year in a position group where we don't know if any of these guys can really play outside of Julian Blackmon at this point. So, I think, we've been saying it all offseason. You got to go get a Diggs or a Simmons just to fill out this defense and really get this defense ready to go for next season. But, it's like the time is now. The time kind of feels like now, but we've been saying that for weeks. So we've been saying that for months at this point, Jake. So I don't know if they're going to make that signing, but I know what I would do in this situation for the Colts.
Yeah, and we don't know. I mean, we've heard them talk so glowingly about cornerback, and they acknowledge it's young and there were some depth issues, but they know they really like it. I don't feel like we've heard them make that same case for safety. It could just be that they've been playing a waiting game because you look at Simmons and Diggs, they're still available. But at this point, I think I don't want to use a player's injury as an excuse or fodder for something, but it's like a warning shot, kind of. Like, this could happen. Now what happens if Julian Blackmon goes down, if Nick Cross or Ronnie, that, you won't have anybody.
Right.
So what's it going to hurt? Is it going to cost you $7, $8, $9 million for 1 year? Because if you sign a veteran free agent at this point, it's for 1 year. You're not signing someone to a multi-year deal. So it's going to make your defense better. I just think you got to do it because it's showing you now how flimsy your safety group really is. And it already was it was in rough shape last year. How many big plays were given up due to miscommunications?
Yeah, my real quick note, and then I'll let you carry us forward here, is that, the Colts have, I think, $21 million in cap space right now as of this point. Typically, the Colts go into the season with like 7 or 8 million in cap space. So they do have around 12 to 13-ish in million that they can play with right now when it comes to cap space. So again, you're looking at Justin Simmons. If you can throw that 12, 13, 14, whatever it is at him, that's fine. Let's just get it done. Let's get that one done. But, we'll see. Well, it's a waiting game. None of the safety market feels like it's moving whatsoever right now anyway.
No.
So we'll see if anything ultimately gets done here. But I think I know what I would do and a lot of you guys would do in this situation.
Yeah, no doubt. So coming up here in a moment, we are going to talk about some good news. And that's Anthony Richardson. He's got his groove going on with a couple of guys, and it's going to spell really good news for the offense if this continues into the regular season. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. I mean, it starts Thursday night, Boston, Dallas. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down closer, the closer that it gets to tip-off. So with these killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. They've got the last-minute deals, so you save up to 60% off of buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever, because obviously, you got Stanley Cup going on, you got the NBA Finals, but it's concert season now too. Summer's kicking off. You got your zone deals. You save even more when you choose a section, but then you let Game Time choose the seat for you. Views from those seats, you get a panoramic view from the seat in the app before you buy, so you know that it's legit. And then, of course, the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you guys watching Fox Sports, ESPN, or any of the real big networks that just seem like hot take machines anymore? And you got to turn down the volume because you're just sick of all the shouting. Make the switch over to Locked On Sports today, which is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today, LOST, lost otherwise, brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 over on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Zach. So this time of year, things are being fine-tuned. You're gearing up for training camp. You're seeing what, coaches see what they want to do going into training camp. And as much as you hate injuries, for the Colts, Michael Pittman Jr. being out the last couple weeks after that scary, collision where he's got the knee, banged knees with Jalen Jones, which, by the way, Shane Steichen said they're just keeping him out for precautionary reasons. That has opened up the door for more targets for Adonai Mitchell and Josh Downs. And Alec Pierce wasn't out there today either. So just going off of like the last couple practices that I've seen, the second of the two open to the media OTA practices last week, and then today, the first day of mandatory minicamp. Josh Downs, big volume, my guy. That never stopped being Anthony Richardson's guy. Yep. Now, of course, with Pittman in the lineup, Pittman is going to be the top receiving option, but it's really shown a light on the chemistry that Josh Downs and Anthony Richardson still have and never lost, even when Richardson left early last season. So it's been mostly short stuff. There has been, progressively some things down the field, but it's mostly quick one-on-one slot winner type stuff. You know what I mean? We saw a lot of that from Josh Downs last year with Gardner Minshew. So I would expect a big dose of that with or without Pittman. Obviously, if anything happens to Pittman at any point, Downs is going to see a huge spike in volume. But the big play threat, a guy who seems to show up every practice that we've seen, making some sort of chunk play or even touchdown, is Anthony Richardson to Adonai Mitchell. It continued today. It's happening with the first team offense. It's happening against the first team corners. We've seen it against Jalen Jones and Juju Brents, Darrell Baker. Like we have seen it happen to the best the Colts have to offer. And this is a guy we already knew he catches everything from his days at Texas, but sometimes it takes these receivers a minute to get their confidence in the NFL. Like, sure, they dominated and made big plays and could moss people in college, but like it takes a minute to acclimate to the NFL and have the confidence to trust yourself to do that. He's there. And from just when we talked to him the night he got drafted, and he said he was pissed about, being the 11th receiver and all that stuff, to when we talked to him today, this dude seems so comfortable, so happy where he's at. Like, he's feeling it right now. And I feel so much better about his prospects of contributing early than I did previously, because I was going to give him a long leash. He's a rookie, first round talent, but second round pick. There was no reason to rush in and have him just like have a huge role right away, but he's earning it. He's making plays. He's doing his part.
Yeah, and I think the big thing with AD Mitchell is I want to see how this looks when the preseason games come along, because I remember this distinctly. I went out to practices last year. Everyone was talking about the connection between Alec Pierce and Anthony Richardson. And then I went out to the practices and I was like, okay, yeah, Pierce and Richardson are like really clicking. Like, these two are on the same page, a lot of big plays down the field and doing some really good things. And then it got to the game and like those preseason games, and that connection started to wane a little bit. They were just not on the same page a lot. And the trust kind of got lost there between Richardson and Pierce. And I'm not saying there wasn't some play design stuff too that also led to that, but it just wasn't on the same page there. So I'm curious to see how that carries forward into the preseason, where, will it be like a Pierce thing like last year, or will it be, Richardson connects with AD Mitchell a couple times in the preseason games and it's like, cool, we're going. We saw it last year in the preseason where Richardson in those preseason games was coming out. He was targeting Josh Downs. He was targeting Kylan Granson. And then when it got to the regular season, those two were his guys. Like, Downs and Granson were his guys that he was going to when in doubt. He also had a really good connection with Ogletree too in those couple games that he played. So I'm curious to see how it carries over into the preseason. But no, this is a great development. The Colts X wide receiver position, their Z wide receiver position was not used very often last year. X receiver. I keep confusing myself.
Pierce being X, yeah.
Yes, Pierce being the X. Sorry, their X wide receiver was not used a ton last year, especially in a lot of their mesh concepts, a lot of their backside concepts. The Colts were a very front side play heavy team. They worked it to Pittman, they worked it to Downs, and sometimes they put Downs on the backside, but for the most part, they were a play side heavy team. So that backside X, who was facing press coverage and facing one-on-one situations, just wasn't a big part of the progression and a lot of times. So if they can have a player like Mitchell, if Mitchell can come out here from day one and be a guy who has chemistry with Richardson and is a guy where Richardson can feel comfortable saying, hey, he's got one-on-one on the backside. I know I got my three-man concept to the right, but I got that one-on-one on the backside. I trust him and I trust that. That's a major, major boost to this offense. I know Greg Cassell said it on Ross Tucker's podcast the other day. He was talking about how the Colts were doing a lot of play side stuff last year and how Richardson wasn't really working back to that one player because that's a little more advanced and there wasn't really that trust and feel yet there. So if you have a player like Mitchell where you're just developing that rapport all offseason, you're feeling really good about that rapport and that connection, that opens up the playbook to go from half field stuff to full field stuff, which would be fantastic for this offense. And then I want to touch on Josh Downs again real quick too, because we talked about him in depth when we talked about this wide receiver room for our positional preview series. I really do think this can be a fantastic season for Josh Downs, whether Richardson plays all season or whatever it's going to be, hopefully all season long. But Downs, I think, having a season where he's not going to get that rookie wall that he hits halfway through the year, hopefully not getting an injury halfway through the year like he did last year, and just building that connection with Richardson, which was really, really ramping up last year as well. I really think Downs has a chance to, be like an 80 to 100 catch guy this season. I think there's a chance at 1,000 yards this year as well. He's going to be a big, big part of this offense. And for my money, he's going to be the second leading receiver on this team, if not the first leading receiver. I think it's going to be second. Like, I'm not trying to go too crazy here with hot takes or anything, but I think there's a really good chance of him putting up like a 90 catch season for like 1,000 yards and a couple touchdowns. Like I think Josh Downs going to have a fantastic year. And this is not just training camp hype. I think everything we saw with him building last year and then what this offense likes to do and what Richardson trusts him with, I think Josh Downs going to have a fantastic year this year.
No, I think it's legitimate. And the thing with Mitchell, I'm especially happy that we're seeing it now already. It's clicking during OTAs and spring ball. It's not like we're getting like a week or so into training camp and they're finally clicking. Like they already seem to have a rapport. And then they're gonna go during the 6-7 week break in between minicamp and training camp. They're gonna go work out together again. Richardson already has plans to get the guys together and throw. So I like the fact that they're already kind of ahead of the game and they already seem to have a connection. Now, I don't think Mitchell's going to be like a big volume receiver right out of the gate, but like clearly they are trying to trust him for big plays. I mean, there was a couple touchdowns today during 7-on-7s. There seems to be chunk plays every day that we've seen. So it's going well.
Yeah, all I care about is keeping that backside progression available to the quarterback and being a red zone target. That's all I need from Mitchell this year. Yeah. I don't need him to catch 100 passes. Leave that for Downs and Pittman. Mitchell just be productive with the opportunities you get. So I'm excited about that connection so far. Coming up, guys, we're going to talk about the other news and notes, including an injury scare at quarterback. Not a big one. I'm not trying to fearmonger you guys. Just a very, very slight one that had all of us freaking out for like 5 seconds on Twitter today. But first, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Right now, FanDuel's got the Celtics as 6.5 point favorites in game 1 of the NBA Finals that starts on Thursday night. The Boston Celtics this year, guys, they have been one of the best teams in NBA history in terms of net rating and just production. So I'm taking the Celtics in that game 1 and honestly might take them for the whole series as well. I know I'm putting my money on them on FanDuel, but what are you guys doing? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Jake. So before we get to the Joe Flacco thing, because we got to talk about Joe Flacco, obviously. Joe Flacco is fun to talk about. Anthony Richardson had a mini injury scare. We didn't lead off the show with this because we don't want it to be some terrifying thing, because it really wasn't. It's a very normal thing. Someone who's been around football as long as you have, Jake, you've probably seen this a million times. He walked off the field for a second, got his back rolled out, and then he was back out there throwing in 11-on-11s. But I know I saw some of the scary tweets out there from the beat reporters.
Yeah, no, we absolutely hated tweeting that, but we had to do it. Right. So it was just after like a routine play. He didn't get hit or anything, which the quarterbacks don't get hit anyways in practice. But, he walked over to the side after. You could tell he was walking gingerly or like favoring something. He just didn't look comfortable. And he took a knee and the trainer looked at him, and then they walked over and had him roll out his back on one of those, those cylindrical roller things. And then he got right back in with positional work and started taking reps again. And then he got back into 11-on-11s. But we're like, oh, God, here we go again. You know what I mean? But luckily it got squashed immediately. I imagine he still practices tomorrow. I mean, he went back into practice today. So still, like, again, for 5 seconds, it's like, oh my God, not again type of thing. But again, I think we can all breathe a sigh of relief, which will transition us into this next part. Joe Flacco absolutely cooking today. During the 11-on-11s, it was a lot of red zone and like short red zone stuff within like 10 yards. And my guy was shredding the second team defense. Like he had 3 touchdowns, like in pretty good succession within like 2 drives. During 11-on-11s. He had one to Ethan Furnia, Tyree Cleveland, and then Mo Alley Cox got one as well. So he was just like, we all know the red zone is the hardest place to pass anyways. And like, that's the veteran for you. Like that's a guy that can, he knows where the soft spots are. So no, that was really good to see, we're not always used to the backup quarterback absolutely shredding everybody, which I mean, it's your own defense, so like that's not great. But hopefully that goes to other teams if you were to ever have to see Joe. But no, I mean it's good. And also the good news, I mean he's old as hell, but the dude still has his arm still rockets, so that's good.
Yeah.
I mean we saw that with Cleveland last year.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of Joe Flacco, I mean, even in his prime, he was arguably the best arm in football. Like he was
Best deep ball
obviously
thrower, yeah.
right. Like obviously, Aaron Rodgers had the arm angles and everything like that. But if you're talking just like distance, it was Joe Flacco. Like Flacco could just launch it in his prime, and again, we saw it with Cleveland last year, where it's like, yeah, he's not what he was when he was like 26, 27, but it's still probably a top 15 arm in football, like in terms of like velocity and just deep ball touch and just getting the ball down the field. So yeah, man, look, ISO Joe, he's going to rip that ball out and he's going to get it to wherever he needs to go. He might throw 10 picks tomorrow because that's just how he is. But it's probably a blast to watch, especially compared to, again, you saw Gardner last year, you saw Ellinger last year. It's not that these are bad quarterbacks, but Flacco comes in here just ripping it probably compared to those guys. It's a very different feel.
Yeah. And my man's still greedy like he was last year with Cleveland. He was huck it, chuck it. Like it was YOLO ball last year with Cleveland. Still seems that way. Like in the red zone, he's looking for the end zone. Like he had dump off options and was just not interested. Like
Love it.
He's going for the points. I appreciate that about him. I know everybody is always very curious about, like camp battles and everything. You can't declare winners or even really. I'm almost hesitate to declare front runners this early as well because it's going to go into training camp and guys are going to have equal opportunities. But the first team defense today was Jalen Jones at the other outside corner. Obviously, Juju Brents and Kenny Moore is in cement. Like that's settled. It's been Jalen Jones and Dallas Flowers, going back and both getting some shots at the first team defense, but it's mostly been Jalen Jones from what I've seen, and then Nick Cross at free safety.
Okay, and then some other. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, you're
other roster battles that I'm kind of keeping an eye on that I wanted to ask you about, and I'm not sure if you 100% know, but like Trey Sermon, is that one pretty locked in at RB2 right now?
Yeah. So I've gotten a lot of traffic from the fantasy community over the last week because I mentioned in my OTA notes last week that Sermon was pretty solidly the RB2. But let me say from a fantasy perspective, if Jonathan Taylor is healthy, I don't expect a big role for Trey Sermon.
No.
You look at whoever's going to win out between Evan Hull and Tyler Goodson as the receiving back, though, I would imagine they would get more action. But Jonathan Taylor is not going to be – he's not going to be giving up a lot of his snaps as the early down short yardage guy.
Yeah.
So if Jonathan Taylor is healthy and has a pulse, Trey Sermon is just a handcuff option. And I only say that because I've gotten a lot of traction from fantasy people over the last week about that. But no, I mean, in terms of early down between the tackles runners, Trey Sermon has been the next guy in after Taylor.
Yeah, and then some other ones. I mean, offensive line, I'm sure, has stayed the same 5 guys.
Yeah. So Blake Freeland has been the right tackle with Braden Smith out. Smith's still out.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
And then tight end, Kylan Granson, I'm sure, has been the de facto number one.
Yeah, it's rotating a lot, but I would say the guys who've been in there the most with the first unit, probably Mo and Kylan right now. You see a lot of Ogletree too. But it's like you and I talked about on our tight end show. It's very situational and matchup based. They've all got their roles. So it's way too – because I have been kind of keeping an eye on that. I think it's way too early to determine who's tight end 1, tight end 2. It's all very based on what packages they've got going on.
Yeah. And the last one I have for here before we get out of here is with wide receivers. Pierce and Pittman weren't out there today, alongside A.D. Mitchell and Josh Downs, who was the other outside wide receiver.
Oh, God, the other outside, DJ Montgomery.
Okay. Yeah. DJ Montgomery truthers are out there. There's a couple of them.
Montgomery got a touchdown from Richardson today, but there's been the receiver group this spring looks a lot different than it will in training camp as long as everyone's healthy, because Doolin hasn't been out there yet, and I imagine he will be out there at training camp at some point. Pittman hasn't been out there for the last couple weeks, and then Pierce missed today.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, Montgomery is a guy they trust as another outside guy. So they talked about that. I mean, they like him and Juwan Winfrey and even Tyree Cleveland. But the receiver group does look a bit different than it will here in 2 months.
Perfect. Well, that's our boots on the ground for you guys. Jake giving us our update from practice. Make sure you guys tune into tomorrow's show. We're going to continue covering mandatory minicamp for these next couple days, and then we'll get more into off-season content until training camp kicks off in late July or early August. Which one is it, Jake? I think it's late July, right?
It usually starts the last week and a half of July.
Perfect. Before we get out of here, though, guys, I do want to remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV app in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We love your guys' ratings and reviews. It will catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.